All right. It's Ariel. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Ariel, you are from Middle Georgia. And so tell us a little bit more about you, your district down there, and what you've got going on.
Right. So I am originally from Mississippi. I live in Middle Georgia because I joined the military I joined the Air Force out of high school and ended up stationed at Robbins Air Force Base until around 2018. And I got out and stayed in the community. It is a wonderful place to live, in my opinion. That's why I'm running for office. I'm really passionate about the community. There's a lot of wonderful organizations in my community that take care of everybody around us. And I think that's probably something I've realized the older that I get that I'm really passionate about. Politics isn't really naturally my thing, but I've got the personality for it, and I definitely don't have a problem doing it. So I end up in that a lot, but I am really focused on activism and like boots on the ground work, going out, making your community better, volunteering, being a good role model for people. And that's something that thankfully we already have a lot of around here. That's kind of why I ended up in politics. They don't really have enough room for me in some of the other places, but um, we how far do you want me to go with it? I know you're gonna end up asking questions. I don't want to get into things that need to be fixed too early.
No, that's fine. So, just a few more connections because really it's the first time we'd spoken. So I'm from Albany originally, down in
Mm,
Southwest Georgia. The first exposure I had to Robbins was I had an uncle that was in security and stationed there for quite a bit. And then once I moved up to Atlanta, I have a friend that was from that area, and he ended up going to Georgia Tech, and we bowled together and all that. So some random connections here and there, to the area. Mom and dad, they have left South Georgia. They both live in North Georgia now, so I don't really have much reason, to come down there. But I like to say that I'm still familiar with the area, and it's in Georgia we have Atlanta and the rest of Georgia.
right.
And you've got you've got these pockets. You've got Macon, you've got Columbus, you've got Savannah, Augusta, but it's an interesting state, and it's a big state. People don't realize it's the biggest state east of the Mississippi. Speaking of going back to where you came from there, and all these 159 counties and everything that we've got going on. So it's definitely interesting that you chose to stay in the area, after getting out of the Air Force and so forth. And thanks for your service in there. I'm just curious if you're able to say, what did you do in the Air Force?
I was a ground radar maintainer, so I maintained radars for air traffic controllers and specifically deployable radars. I was in a unit that was all like our primary mission was to deploy, set up airfields, and then come back and we just rotated. I never actually got the opportunity to deploy, but I got to work on setting some of the deployments up, and I got to work with a lot of like the training for that stuff. I burned really hard in the military, and I'm really bright, and I kind of worked my way up really early and got the cushy desk job before I got out, and I really liked that because I got to see the way things work. My degree is in philosophy. I like to break things apart and look at them from the inside. So it was really cool to only in 6 years get to see both sides, like the leadership and the groundwork of that job. It was really neat. And then now I work for Northrop Grumman, also working on radars in kind of a different field. It's more test equipment for radars.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I had done things, I guess, a little differently, my other job would have been probably an airline pilot. So that somewhere in the middle, there is a shared interest for aviation.
Oh
Somewhere in the
yeah,
middle of all that.
one of these days I'm getting my pilot's license. I just got to slow down on everything else first.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, if you win the district, that probably would actually slow you down quite a bit because it's going to give you quite a part-time job. People don't realize in Georgia, the legislature meets, is it January? What's when do they meet here? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I, I think that it's like January to like end of March, early April is what I think it was last time,
Yeah.
somewhere around there.
Yeah, and these, I did a little road trip this weekend, and I swear I saw a billboard for a guy running for the House up there. I saw his signs that he was running for the House, and I saw his billboard at his law firm, where the law firm was welcoming him, to come. So that the people don't realize, that these state races, you have to get elected every 2 years. Both the Georgia House and the Senate, they're elected every 2 years, and they're not full-time jobs, as we just said. So you go downtown, you meet for that time, but the rest of the year, I mean, yeah, you have that 2-year term, but you know, it doesn't pay much. You're not really getting into this for the money. I mean, I guess you can look at the connections and other things that might get you, but it's not that cushy of a job, honestly, to get these state,
No,
Senate
not
and
it's
House
not to
rep
me.
positions. Yeah. I mean, I could go on and on. Now, I did a little bit of research. What's your district number? 140.
7.
Yeah, so I had that right. 147. Is that currently Bethany Ballard?
It is, yes. I ran against her in 2022 when the seat was open. She was the campaign manager for the previous incumbent.
Gotcha. And did they move the district lines much, or is it pretty much the same district now?
It was a new map in 2022, and it's a new map in 2024. They So one of the reasons supporting veterans was such a strong part of my platform in 2022 is because Robbins Air Force Base, at least the southern half of it, was part of the district. But from the maps that I've seen after this last redistricting, the base isn't even in my district at all. I think it's 145 now, which is really disappointing to me because I'm a veteran. I'm a disabled veteran. So when we're talking like money and jobs and stuff, I wouldn't be doing it for the money anyway. My bills get paid with my disability check, and I work 75% of full time for Northrop Grumman, so I got plenty of stuff to keep me busy outside of this. But that's also something I'd be willing to cut back a lot on if I won. But yeah, the district has changed drastically since 2022. It's shrunk a lot. It's much smaller than it was. It's easier to maintain for campaign reasons, but it's now one of the smallest districts in the whole state if you look at it on the map, and that's kind of disappointing because they just keep shrinking it, and I'm like, that's less space that I can be running to be responsible for to help the lives of the people in it. But I understand that. I guess the context for that is that Warner Robins, which is a majority of the district, is the I don't know if it's moved up, but it was the 11th fastest growing city in Georgia. So there's a lot of stuff coming into Warner Robins since just in the last 10 or so years that I've lived here. So with it moving so fast, that's really changed a lot of dynamics around here politically and obviously, geographically.
Yeah, it almost reminds me a little bit of what's going on in Augusta. You've got the Fort Gordon stuff, and I think that's the big base that's over there. And it's not just the base. As you mentioned, you've got this whole complex that goes around the base. You've got military contractors. And over in Augusta, you even have this whole national security apparatus, as I'll call it. And you might remember the reality winner fiasco that was going on. And she was from Georgia, and was from, well, she may not have been from Georgia, but she was actually stationed over there. But people don't realize, I think they discount sometimes the actual impact that, I mean, even down in Albany, you have the Marine base. And growing up there, I remember, coming up for base closure lists and things like that, but the huge impact that all of that federal money flowing back into Georgia really has. And you don't hear people talk about it a lot. Like all of the political ads, you're hearing nothing about, decisions that have been made for these military bases and so forth. So I'm getting off of, but I wanted to paint a picture about your district, about you, about, and redrawing the district as well. Have you done or been able to see like certain areas? Do you feel like it's more blue now, more red now? What are you seeing as you go out and campaign?
It scares me. I think it's a little more red now, but
Mm.
I am from a really small town in Mississippi. I can make friends with just about anybody unless they're already decided that they're not going to like me. I can't do anything about that. I accepted that a long time ago, but I work really well with groups of people that a lot of Democrats don't really want to kind of get in the room with. My family is full of Republicans, and I still have good relationships with most of them. So I'm pretty good at kind of drawing the line with like being pretty balanced with everybody. My district's gotten more red, but my city has gotten more blue, and I think that's had a big effect on kind of the area around here. So Warner Robins elected their first woman and first Black mayor, the same person, obviously, in I want to say 2018, 2020. It's been within the last however many years. She's a Democrat, and she has really done wonderful things for the city. It was kind of in a chokehold for a really long time with somebody who wasn't doing anything to progress it at all. I don't know that they were necessarily bad at their job, but they weren't really doing much to make you feel like this was a community you wanted to be a part of. And since she took office, it's just completely changed this area. There we have events that we would have never had before. We have food truck Fridays. We did a trunk or treat the other day. I went and handed out candy to kids, and we never had
Mhm.
that before. There's a much more sense of community around here than there used to be, and I think that that's changed. I think honestly, I wouldn't even say we're more red. I'd just say we're pretty purple, to be honest. But taking out certain parts of the district, or the parts that they took out, were more blue. So we're still pretty purple, but they took out my strong blue area, and that kind of
Interesting.
is going to hurt it in the long run. But
Yeah.
I still have
We'll
so
see what
much pride
happens.
for this community. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Now that other district, are you in touch? Or is there are there two candidates going in that other district? Just while we're talking about it here.
And 145 that the base
Yes.
has. What are they talking about?
Mhm.
What?
So the one that when they redrew the districts between the one you're running in and then the one that when they pulled the base out of it, are you in contact? Are there two candidates running in that district now too?
Yes. I don't want to misspeak, but I'm pretty sure the Democrat running in that is Tangi Herring, and then the incumbent,
Okay.
I think it was Dickey. I believe he was running again. I'd have to double check on him. I just honestly just looked at the ballot for that area this morning, and I can't remember it all. But um, I I haven't noticed anybody really talking about the districts changing up much this round. It was a huge conversation point in 2022. Vote, and that's another thing about voting rights, was such a big conversation, and nothing changed, but nobody's talking
Mhm.
about it anymore. And that kind of bothers me, because if no one else is talking about it and I'm sitting here screaming about it still, they're like, "Hey, we have other things we're thinking about. We want to talk about that." And I'm like, "Yeah, I get it, but we didn't have to move away from this. We still have to talk about
Yeah.
this."
Yeah, I mean, there was a meeting that happened, and the party that's in power actually did it there, and it is what it is. But I'm thinking that this may get us into this first topic here, as public transportation. So we had gone through an issue list of topics you wanted to talk about, but I'm actually curious, what does that look like in Middle Georgia? I mean, Atlanta, we have MARTA, we have the Gwinnett Transit, Cobb Transit, you've got the train and all that. What does that look like in Middle Georgia, public transit?
So it's non-existent, which is why it's something I'm so passionate about. For one, because I'm a disabled veteran, so I'm really in tune with the disability community. Um, and they are really struggling around here because they can't get around. Public transportation gets, I think, kind of swept away from people talking about it at the state level because they see it as a city issue. But it's still something that you can get funding for at the state level. It's still something that your taxes are going to go towards. So that's something that is set at the state level. There's also a huge amount of money at the federal level that can be brought down through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that like no one is talking about. Anytime anybody talks on Facebook about public transportation around here, you have a million people in the comments like, "Well, how are we going to afford that?" And I'm like, they have like billions of dollars sitting there waiting to be spent. We just have to ask for it. So it's something
Mhm.
I'm trying to bring awareness about around here, because, like I said, we're the 11th fastest growing city in Georgia. We're we don't really have the leisure to not have public transportation anymore. When I got out of the Air Force, I struggled for a bit trying to find a source of income. I had to wait a couple months before I started getting my GI Bill money, because I got out like at the beginning of the summer, and then I had school starting in the fall. So I had the summer to deal with. So I started driving for like Uber and Lyft just to have something to pay the bills. And I noticed really quickly that it specifically, like even more specifically in Warner Robins, there were a lot of people that were working part-time jobs that were having to pay about $8 one way and then $8 back at the end of the night to get to and from work. That's over 2 hours of their workday if they're making minimum wage, just to get to work and get home in the day. And that's insane to me. There are so many options. I mean, a public bus would just completely revitalize this area. And we have a huge problem with the influx of like in cars and certain roads that can't handle it. They're not doing a lot to build up the infrastructure, like the street infrastructure, but there's so many more people coming in. And public transportation would take a lot of those cars off the road. It would make it a lot safer. There's a lot of traffic accidents that I think would be mitigated by having really good public transportation. Um, but yeah, we don't have anything here. It's a real problem, and I'm also pushing for it from an economic standpoint, because you get people that can get places easier, and they don't have to spend as much to get there, and they have more money when they get out to to go shopping. You know, you take a bus ride to a little shopping center and you have so much more time and energy you can put into it and money. It just seems like a win for everybody.
Yeah. And some other forms of this, I mean, if you look out at I'm not saying by any means, I want to preface this, that Middle Georgia is anything like the Bay Area in California, but you have companies like Google and everything, they put their workers on a bus and they bus them to the campus, you know, to their meeting. You have another extreme, and I have to go back and find the article, but it's been tried in Metro Atlanta. I believe MARTA was trying it. But of course, you can ride MARTA buses, you can ride the trains, but they were trying these on-demand type services. Think of it as like Lyft and Uber shared, but like 2 or 3 times the capacity. And they would look at the analytics and see at, you know, 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m., you have 10 to 15 people going from this part of the city to this part of the city. And it made sense to actually run a small minibus in that route in the morning and then the reverse in the evening. It doesn't have to be, you know, huge buses, you know, or things like that. There are other more cheap options to make this happen. And yeah, I mean, it's there for the taking. And I live in Tucker. This is DeKalb County, and I'm not too far from Beaufort Highway. And I don't know if you've ever been up to this area, Beaufort Highway. You can literally get anything on Beaufort Highway. There are parts of Beaufort Highway where there's no English, and you have folks there that they take it upon themselves that you have. It's not a MARTA bus. It's like a local bus service that you can just ride up and down Beaufort Highway on, because it literally is a marketplace for that. You have unbranded or Latino versions of Lyft and Uber in this area, and it's there for the taking. I mean, this is capitalism at its finest. And you know,
Don't say that dirty word around me.
I know, but it literally is. I mean, you know, but people want to debate socialism or whatever, but it literally is that. So there are ideas out there for the taking. But these are good talking points, and people will say, well, okay, well, is it a 60 passenger bus? No, it's, you know, this is a minibus that just does this. Or you have a company that is they have struggles of hiring enough workers. We went up to North Carolina this weekend. You had a company van, and literally that company van was shuttling employees from a meeting point to the place. It's the same thing. So, I mean, there are options out there. Don't let people just, you know, say no and turn their head and walk the other way, because otherwise they're just going to be sitting in traffic or getting in wrecks. So. Which leads to healthcare.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, true.
You know,
you need that for your accidents.
Right. So, you know, here in Georgia, Kemp just continues to not, and this is coming from someone who is on Obamacare right now. My current employer does offer a plan, but it's not advantageous for me to take that plan. And it's not advantageous for me to go on my spouse's plan either. So I actually have Obamacare. My mom retired early and was on Obamacare for several years. And I'm scared as hell that Georgia wants to take over. And I think they're the first state to be allowed to do what they're doing with this whole Georgia Access thing. I'm scared as hell what they're going to do. Right now, they claim they offer the same plan for next year with just a little bit more money. But, you know, this is coming from an overweight white guy that when I got laid off decades ago, or was it 2 decades ago? We didn't have Obamacare, and the company shut down. There was no COBRA. And there was one insurance company out there that would cover me for double the premium.
Yep.
This is why I'm scared as hell that Georgia claims they're going to have a better idea than what Obamacare has been doing for how long now?
Long enough to know that it works, or that it's it's a good option.
Yeah, what are you hearing down there?
It's pretty split. The thing that I don't understand is pretty much everyone says we want expanded healthcare, right? That's great. But the second you say, okay, let's expand Medicaid, they're like, no, we can't expand Medicaid that's liberal, whatever. I'm like, you just said you wanted better health care. What do you think this means? So it's almost like it's just been, the connotation is just so twisted for some people. It doesn't, you have to just say it the right way. Like, do you want good health care? Yeah. Okay, then vote for me and I'll go make it work. Like
Yeah.
I'll get it to you. But yeah,
Yeah.
expanded Medicaid, like from what I've heard, the money it's already been paid for. It's sitting there. It's another thing like public transportation, just waiting to be dispersed to the people, because for some reason we have all these things that just keep sitting in a spot when there are places they need to be. And that's why I'm running. I want to bring the things that need to be in this community here. But yeah, expanded Medicaid. I keep trying to pound it into people. You would pay less if you were using Medicaid than you would with your private insurance. I pay for private insurance, and half of the medical clinics around here say I'm out of network. Then what is the point? Why am I? Almost nobody will take my dental insurance. I think there's one dentist office in this entire town. And while we're on that topic, it takes about 6 months to a year to get in with a dentist in this area right now, because we are at such a lack of healthcare. But we have no problem bringing in 700 new car washes and coffee shops. And we need specialists around here. We really need to find a way to start bringing in, or like incentivize healthcare specialists to move into our area, because it is just so hard to get anything around here. I knew a guy who had a dental emergency, like really strong pain, and they told him it was a 6-month wait before he can get seen for a dental emergency. Like what
So,
what do
so
you
what
think
does
an
he do? Just
emergency
drive to
is?
Atlanta? I mean,
Just
what
I
do you
don't know.
drive to Atlanta?
He just waits. He's the type of guy that's just going to do it. He's just going to do it. He's just going to wait until he's got time, I guess, or he's allowed in. But we are at a lack of good health care already. And like a majority, I'm sure I say like you probably already do, obviously, but a majority of rural counties in Georgia don't have access to like clinics, or definitely don't have hospitals. And that's another thing that this would do. It would bring healthcare clinics and hospitals and specialists into these areas, so that they actually have access to it and they don't bleed out in the hour in between their house and their nearest clinic. That's something people don't think about when they're talking about this. It's such a big conversation, and we just hear these small talking points about it, and we miss how important it would be. But it's already there. It's already been paid for. It's going to give you better options than you already have. I'm currently going to the doctor to try and diagnose some issues I've been having, and I had to get some diagnostics done for this. So I called to make the appointment, and they're like, "Your insurance doesn't cover it. It's going to be $400 for this for a CT scan." And I can't continue going to my doctor to figure out what's wrong with me without this. As it is, this doctor's office is I'm pretty sure out of network too. So I'm already paying more, because I can't just keep looking for places. Eventually you have to stop somewhere. And now you're telling me that I have to pay extra even though I have insurance. It's insane that people aren't. Everybody wants to complain about private insurance, but nobody wants to do anything about it. Well, not nobody, but the majority of people just want to make it this boogeyman in the background that they don't actually want to confront.
It also sounds a lot like capitalism to me. So until America decides to permanently change that healthcare in America is not a money-making proposition, none of this is going to change. And I mean, the rest of the world does not look at healthcare as a money-making proposition. And you go to Canada, you go to Europe, you go to all these other countries, it's not a money-making proposition. It's a public welfare, okay, call it socialism thing. And until that changes, honestly, here in the US, not a damn thing is going to change, unfortunately.
I know.
Um,
I
and
I try to tell everybody that when they ask why, like, I'm so pro universal health care. I was in the military for 6 years. I didn't have to pay for health care. I didn't have to pay for housing. I mean, I did, but I got the allowance for it. I didn't have to pay for
yeah,
school. I didn't have to pay for anything. So you're going to let me have all that, and you're not going to expect me to go and fight for everybody else to have that? Like,
yeah,
when people want to act like socialism is this horrible thing, what do you think public libraries and hospitals and schools and
yeah,
Social Security, like, what do you think that is? I mean,
yeah.
it's just, I just wish that we could have an honest, non misinformation filled conversation about things like that as a public, and it's just not ever going to happen, not anytime soon.
Well, critical thinking is hard. So, you gotta.
Get a philosophy degree, that'll change your life.
Which leads on to workers' rights. So you kind of alluded to this earlier. You're hearing a lot of folks are working 2 part-time jobs. maybe expand on that, or is it getting any better? What's the latest you're hearing?
I think everybody knows that workers in America don't get paid enough. I mean, the minimum wage is what, 7.25, and there's no state where you can live off of less than $15 an hour. So my perspective is, personally, why are you working a job? I mean, you don't have a choice, but hypothetically, why are you working a job where you don't actually get your needs met? There's no point in that. Those jobs should not exist. That shouldn't even be allowed for someone to work in a spot where they're not making enough to where they can actually survive. That makes no sense to me. So I'm pretty passionate about raising the minimum wage. With inflation, which I'm sure you probably are in the same mindset of this, is it has a lot more to do with capitalism than anything else. I mean, there's a lot of mismanagement at the federal level, but there's also a lot of CEOs that got really greedy after COVID. And so now all that money's getting funneled up to the top, and your people at the bottom are struggling. Like, they're not coming to work at their best because they can't survive. I mean, they can't buy the food to survive, right? They're struggling, they're hungry, they're cold because they can't pay their power bills. So now it's like at this point where there's no quality of life. What's the point at working and living if all you have to do is work? There are a lot of people that feel that way. I think that's the one thing that transcends political bounds, is we all feel that way. It's just some people just feel like that's part of life, and other people are like, hey, maybe there's something that we can do about this. We're kind of looking at it from a bigger perspective. There are things that we can do to make this easier. I can't stop inflation, I can't stop greed, I can't stop federal mismanagement of money, but I can work as a state legislator to help make the budget help Georgians, right? Like, that would be my job, would be to help set laws and to make a budget. And the more that you can do to give back to Georgians is really the only thing that you can do to really fight inflation. And so that's the conversation that comes up mostly around here. It's not about workers' rights. I just praise it as workers' rights because I think that's a lot of the solution for people. It's always inflation, though. It's always, we don't have the money to go out and buy our basic necessities. What do? You fight for the workers to get what they need. Really, I'm a very, like, fix it from the ground up person. I don't think that you can just go and stop everything at the top. I don't have any control over what other people do, but I can go and fight for the little guy to make sure that their voice is heard, and that they know that there are options available to them. I'm very pro union. I sat in a meeting with the Department of Labor secretary in 2022, and it was really eye opening for me to see, kind of see politics from that perspective, from the perspective of, like, fighting for the little guy, and how you can do that. So I've gotten a lot more pro labor, pro union over time. So that's kind of my thing. Is it's always phrases about inflation, but I think workers' rights would do a lot to help people in that.
Yeah, and in these small towns, well, I'm going to say I'm a little bit older than you. You don't have to say your age, but I remember this stuff back in the 80s, and the Republicans are saying trickle down economics, trickle down economics. It hasn't worked, folks. I mean, and why are you going to put a party back in power again and that keeps trying the same thing over and over again? Because it ain't working. So we'll leave that there. Common sense gun control. So this hit home up in North Georgia recently. Our roommate's niece was actually in that school. And I'll actually put, I don't have the names, but I actually sent an email out to several of the legislators here in Georgia. I'll bounce this off. We didn't have a chance to discuss it, but I'll bounce it off of you. Lobbying, insurance, the insurance lobby is huge. Why are we not requiring, I mean, you have to have insurance to drive a car in this state. You have to have, you pretty much have to have health insurance. Otherwise, you're just going to go bankrupt if something happens to you. If you own a home and have a mortgage, you have to have home insurance. So why in the hell are you allowed to have a gun and not required to have liability insurance for it?
Yeah, honestly, that's not something that I had personally thought about, but that makes complete logical sense. I think you should have mine is more like you should be trained, you should have a license, you should have a background check, but that is something that makes total sense. Why well, the answer to why. Somebody's used it as their PowerPoint at some point. That's how we end up in a lot of the crappy situations that we're in. But my stances on guns come from like a respect position on the power that guns hold. From a small, really small town. My family has plenty of hunters in it. We've had guns in the house my entire life. I was in the military. I'm really well trained on guns, and I'm scared of them, but I also feel confident around them. My wife is the exact opposite. I'm actually sometimes scared that we have guns in the house because she's not comfortable with it, and that's kind of where I get a little more on the safe storage laws. Personally, I think people should be responsible enough to know where to put their guns, but then that not everybody's going to do that. So I think that's a wonderful idea that I'd like to look at more about like the places where that has been implemented and how that affected like actually being able to defend yourself. That's really my only worry is like if you have to secure your gun, then what's the point in having it in like in a defense situation? But I'm always open to new ideas on that. But liability insurance, absolutely. If you're right, if you have to have insurance for anything else that's dangerous, why not? I mean, it's funny. I had a virtual town hall last night. I was talking about this. We like I'm obsessed with history, and a lot of the reasons that we died in the past, we've kind of gotten rid of. Like we don't have polio like we used to. We have a much
Mhm.
less maternal death rate. It's still not great, but it's much less than it was. You're not 50. You don't have a 50% chance to die before the age of 15. But now we've made all these new ways to kill ourselves, right? Like cars and
Yeah.
cigarettes and guns and all these other things. It's just wild to me that it's such a big problem. But yeah, a lot of my common sense gun control is background checks, a 3-day waiting period. I've never heard anybody else at least in Georgia when they talk about gun control talking about that. But I had read that Canada did that. I don't know if it was in the whole country, if it was in specific province. I don't remember. I think it's provinces. I've been to Canada once. Don't don't make fun of me. But 3-day waiting period. It cut down on domestic violence because people have time to think about their actions. They don't act as rashly when they have time to think about it.
Yeah, you're not as pissed off. I actually had a manager previously who was Canadian, and he was always amazed when it came down just the gun culture. He said if you wanted to buy a gun in Canada, there were only specific gun shops. You had to actually go into that place, and then it was in like a back room, like it was porn or something in the back room. You had to go in there, and had to be of age. You may have had to have it, and just the differences and the number of deaths that we have compared to these other countries is just like a whole different approach to it. We could go on and on and on.
Oh, and it comes
Of
to
trying
gun
to do
control.
this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So picking back up on gun control, you had another angle that you wanted to pick up on this as well.
Right. So gun control falls under on my platform, my public safety ideas, obviously, or for obvious reasons. But also something I think is really important that I don't hear talked about a lot is what I think is the need for resources in the community for kids to be built up. So like rec centers and parks and intramural leagues, like anything that gets kids active. A lot of kids like to run around our neighborhoods and just kind of act like crazy people for they're free on the summers, they don't have anything else to do. I think that if we gave people outlets that were a little more creative and safer, that would help them from being raised in a way that might maybe thinks it's okay to be a nuisance to your neighbors. But also I have a really strong belief that people who feel connected to their community are less likely to harm it. If you love the people around you and you're already acclimated to taking care of them, you're not really going to want to hurt them, in my opinion. I mean, I may just be really naive in that, but I think that giving kids ways to be connected to their community and to put their energy in a more productive way is a really good way to cut down on what could end up being people who would turn to a life of crime because that energy didn't have a better outlet.
Yeah. And I don't think the internet is a good way to expend that energy.
No.
unless
TikTok is
unless
the
it's a
bane of my existence.
controlled internet situation.
Right. Use it for
For
Khan
sure.
Academy. That's about all that I would advocate for.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, you said you're a veteran yourself. We've talked about that several times already. But anything else beyond yourself or anything you've heard from your other friends there with supporting veterans?
About like just in general what's going on with the veteran
Hmm.
community.
Hmm.
I don't know. I think it's such a weird kind of niche little group of people. Like when it comes to politics, it's really hard to get veterans involved in it because you don't really feel connected to it. You kind of feel like you're playing your part and there's nothing you can do about it when you're there. So reaching veterans has always been so hard to do politically, but there's so much out there that if they don't get involved in it, they get screwed over. Like it's a lot of veterans don't know how to vote, like especially if they're not in their home of record. They don't know about like Iacava ballots. They, I think I read somewhere that there was a presidential election in the last like what like 8 years maybe that was lost. I would had to have been the Clinton. That's the only one that would make sense. I think it was the Clinton election that she lost by the amount of people that didn't vote that were registered voters in the military that were overseas, and every one of those people could have voted. And obviously, they weren't all going to be one. They were all, we're not going to go to one party, but the fact that there were that many people that didn't vote that had the ability to that probably didn't know that they could is just mind blowing. So there's a lot of stuff that I try to advocate for veterans. Like, you know, healthcare in the VA is free, but it's not the best quality. There have been plenty of news stories in the past couple of years from all over the country of veterans committing suicide in the waiting room of a VA hospital because they couldn't get care fast enough. That should never happen. The 22 a day suicide rate statistic is just mind blowing to me. I personally have a friend that I was in the military with who did commit suicide since we had both gotten out, and I didn't really have a personal connection until then, and now it's just it really brought to the forefront of my mind that like I knew I was struggling. A lot of my, and I'm completely candid about this because it's something I think that people should talk about more. Majority of my 90% disability is mental health related, and a lot of those things were just things that were really exacerbated by the stress of the military. Because like I mean I'm not a combat veteran. I would never claim that, but it does do things to people that aren't, right. There's a lot of stress that goes behind that life. You're pretty much expected to be on call 24/7, which I mean, I wasn't getting calls at 2 o'clock in the morning, but you can't really lead a normal life that way, or at least not like a normal adult life. Um, so there's a lot of stuff that people in the military don't really they take for granted, and they don't realize that it's it's actually worse than it has to be, but they think it's better because they're already used to the sacrifice of it. Mental health is just a killer to my generation in the military. The generation's probably before Gen X. Gen X it just seems very they don't they're Gen X across the board just doesn't seem to really care much, right? My mom is like that. She's like, I'm at my point where I'm tired. I just want to ride out the rest of my life. I get it. The people that were older than that, generally in the military, joined for patriotic reasons. They were very like they wanted to go protect their country. My generation and under joined for free healthcare and free school. So when it comes to the stress of it, we didn't join because we were completely fine with it, with the idea of giving our lives away to this. We joined because we were in disadvantaged situations and we were trying to make a better life for ourselves. So that mindset is just so different between the generations in the military, and it kind of makes it harder to communicate, but also to get people to really care about anything because it's just kind of a mess right now. I'm sure over time that'll balance out, but when I was in, there was such a divide between generations and how they saw everything. There was the sit down and shut up generation, and then there was the okay, but why? Why are we doing this? And there's not a side that's right or wrong, but they're not really trying to find a way to get along much. So it just kind of it makes it hard. Communication with the military to the outside world is kind of the crux of the issue that I'm getting at. It's just really hard to reach people and get them passionate about problems because they're just used to being beaten down. But there's a lot that we need to do to support veterans. The reason I'm so passionate about it specifically is, well, obviously because I am one, but like I said, when I got out of the military, I struggled to find a job. Even after I got in school and did that for a little bit and got out, I really had trouble finding a job. So you see all of these advertisements for like Home Depot and I don't know, like T-Mobile, like how proud they are of the military and veterans. And you go and you apply for those. And I failed a personality test for the T-Mobile application. Like, why is that even an option to begin with? But you say that you're not making it easy for anybody to do anything. That's a problem for everybody. That's not just an obstacle for veterans, but it's tough out there. We've got a huge homeless veteran population around here. There's a local homeless shelter that I do some work with, and they specifically go and find homeless women veterans and give them a place to stay and like a kind of easy. I say education, it's like classes. It's not like going to school, but they give them everything they need, and those are the kind of things that I support, like making sure that people just in general have resources, but specifically veterans. Man, we've had to go through some stuff. It's tough to get out and not feel supported.
Yeah, for sure. That organization that you mentioned in Middle Georgia, what's the name of it?
Genesis Joy House, Genesis Joy Homeless House, something like that, but it's Genesis Joy.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's really, how do you say it? The way that things are structured in this country, that it goes down to like the corporate balance sheet, that a corporation can give thousands of dollars to a charity and write it off as an immediate tax deduction. There's literally no difference the way that the corporate balance sheet is written, but they just do this. They're getting basically free publicity, free PR for this. And the changes that were made a couple of years ago to the tax code, us personally, that there's no benefit, honestly, to giving any money or time to these charities. That stuff just needs to be flipped back the other way. It just doesn't make sense, the way that this whole country is prioritizing that kind of stuff. And why are we relying on nonprofit entities to support our veterans? That's messed up in this country.
I agree.
Again, we could go on and on.
Yeah, I'm torn about it because, like, I'm of the mindset that it is the government's responsibility, but like realistically, when you look at it and they're not taking care of it, it's like, what do you do? Like, you're right, it shouldn't be their responsibility. But I'm so thankful that there are people out there that will be like, hey, you're not doing it, so I'm going to do it for you. It's nice to, like, I think at some level it is really important to have like the community support. The government should be giving them the money for it, but to have those organizations around to do the groundwork, I think is so important. But man, I wish that they had the funding to have the biggest house that they possibly could buy in this city, though.
Yeah. And then lastly, public education. So I had shared it's a bit of a dated episode, but a lot of the stuff still rings true. There's no shortage of attempts here in Georgia. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's one step closer to taking public funds to give to private education for K through 12, which I think is completely insane. Growing up, I'm a product of Georgia public schools from kindergarten all the way through my master's degree. I was a baby of the Georgia Hope Grant. I lottery paid for my undergraduate degree here in Georgia. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I feel like I got a pretty good education. And every year, over these past, 5-10 years, there is an attempt to slowly chip away at the public education here in Georgia. And there was an opinion piece in the AJC that is basically looking at mostly the conservative people here in Georgia. This banning of books bullshit that is going on in Georgia right now, not trusting professional educators to just do their job. You have to sit in the middle of the classroom and just question what a trained professional teacher or a principal is doing. Oh, and you want to go run and be a Karen on the school board just so that you can sit there and nag? No, ma'am. That this is what is going to destroy what we had in Georgia, and it's just going to continue to just implode it. The previous episode was with Stephen Owens. He's the budget policy guy here in Georgia that talks about a lot of these things. And it's just, I don't have any kids. I say that folks, and I'm in my mid-40s now, I have no kids. I say everyone that is having kids, you are a braver soul than I right now to bring up kids right now in this environment. And that also goes, I mean, if you have a kid right now, that kid is going to live over 100 years old, most likely, with the way that, we've griped about healthcare, but, people still live longer. And they're probably going to be around for a long time. I have no idea with the way things are going, how this is going to look, in 100 years. I won't be here. You may be here. I don't know. But I've said a lot on this. I got on my soapbox, but I'll let you talk on public education. So
no, we're in the same mindset with that. I'm very pro education in general. went after a bachelor's degree for absolutely no reason that has nothing to do with my job or my career field, because I was just really interested in learning more about the world. So the fact that there are things that kids aren't going to learn about that I had the opportunity to learn about as a kid is really sad. I I I think I already said I'm obsessed with history. I restarted the World History Origins Project Khan Academy class. It's I don't, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's like a really well broad perspective history course starting from like the Big Bang Theory until today. And just in the first lesson, they talk about um, how important it is to look at history with analytical skills. So it's basically the whole argument of no, we just want to teach facts, or no, we have to use our skills to look at this analytically. And that conversation is something that I guess I didn't really realize was such a big. I was from Mississippi. That it was all about you just do what you're told. There wasn't a lot of analytical thinking that I was taught growing up. So you say you're proud to be a Georgia school alumni. I can't say the same for Mississippi schools. There's a lot of stuff I've had to relearn as an adult. But I mean, that's not their fault. You know, they only know what they know. But you have to be able to listen to just to anybody's story to get a better perspective of the world. There's a TED talk that they also had a video of in the beginning of this course, and I can't remember her name. I can't pronounce it right, but it's a woman from Nigeria, and she talks about how when she was young, the only books that she had access to were books about British kids. So they were all blonde hair, blue eyed, eating apples, you know, in the snow. And she would write about that really young. And she didn't realize until she was older that there were books about people that looked like her. And being a kid who realized I was queer really early in life, I didn't know that there were people in fiction that looked like me. I'd never seen it before. It's not even necessarily that it was hidden from me in school. They just didn't have it there to begin with. It wasn't something that they were even going to put there. We didn't talk about banned books because there was no reason to have the conversation. That we just didn't have it available to us. But there was never a you can't do this. There was never a connotation of it's a bad thing. I was still encouraged to go out and to learn and to read. Um, so the fact that there are these kids that are going to grow up without knowing these perspectives and these stories that are classics to us, I just can't imagine. And like you said, like how are you going to take that power away from like their parents? How are you going to tell somebody you aren't smart enough, which you're wrong to begin with, because knowledge should be available to everyone. I believe personally it should be free and available. But how are you going to say you aren't smart enough to know what your kids should learn? Like they're going to teach them that anyway. They're going to go out. So what's the point in the kids that don't want to read that, whose parents don't want them to read it, probably aren't going to find it. And if they do, good for them. That's great. But to make it something that's like got a bad connotation to it, honestly, I don't know. Maybe it'll make a whole generation of nerds that are like really cool because they had to sneak books, you know, behind the stands in school, and it made them outlaws.
You know, that's an irony. I mean, like I said, I don't have any kids. I'm an only child, but to tell a kid, no, don't do that, or we're going to take this book away from you. It's like, really?
Yep. I don't
But
get
go
it.
right ahead, Karens, if that's what you guys want to do there.
No, that's insane to me. I just think it's so important to get a good perspective of the world. But the whole argument of should we just focus on the facts of the world without actually talking about what the broader conversation around that was? Like, yeah, you can say that Black people live in America, but like why do they live in America? You know, like that's something that you need to talk about for the most part. Like, why are things the way that they are? You can have your facts, but you have got to analyze why they are that way. I didn't understand math until I took a logic course, and now like my life has just been changed from stuff like that. Like philosophy just really put the world into a perspective that I didn't even know was possible until that point. And I think everyone should have to take a philosophy course on or some kind of logic course to be able to see things for like what they truly are. But while we're on the conversation of education, because I think that you said this was the last topic anyway, I don't think that kids are even going to be able to focus on the things that they're learning in school if they're hungry. So I think that there was a bill pushed up by my friend Amani Barnes in the state house last year, and it was for free lunches for kids in schools, and unfortunately did not pass. But if I had been there, if I had won in 2022, I would have been right beside her pushing for that the entire time, because I think that's a wonderful idea. I had free lunch. I grew up on free lunch in elementary school, and that made all the difference to me. It's um, it's not really possible to focus when you're hungry. you can't sit there and you can't learn. So like, what's the point in even sending these kids to school if they're not gaining anything from it because they can't focus in their classes? So I think that it goes along with like taking care of your people as a government, it's your responsibility, I believe. And I think that making sure that people are fed is so important, and that the base level that starts in the schools. The kids are the future of our country. Don't you want to raise them to be the strongest and the smartest that they can be? So yeah, I'm very, very pro public education. And the voucher thing, taking money from public schools to give to private schools when they're tuition based, they already have the money. Why would you take some of the only funding that these public schools get away? They already don't have enough. Teachers are already having to pay out of their own pockets to get school supplies. And you're telling me you're going to take more and give it to this kid who is already in a family that's rich enough to afford to send them to a private school? No, I don't. I think that's insane.
Yeah. And there's some interesting discussion in that other episode of Mr. Owens, and he talks about some of these rural Georgia, because this is, it hits home here, that some of these forms of these bills that have been presented have been killed by rural Georgia, because you had some rural Georgia legislatures that looked at their local school systems like, what we have here is working. We're not for this. So it was quite ironic that you had these factions or these lobbyists coming in trying to take that money, and these folks going, this is not passing the smell test. No, thank you. So it's very interesting on that. And it goes back to several points here. And this is a meme that has hit with me, and it's hit with a lot of my friends over this past week or two. So it's a picture of, you might remember from some of our history books, it's a picture of a slave ship coming over, and how unfortunately, the slaves, were just packed in these ships. And so it's a picture of that to kind of paint the picture here. And it says, I don't remember southern states complaining when undocumented workers came over like this.
No, they didn't. The Irish immigrants didn't complain about getting free land.
Yeah. So that may be a good place to end our episode, unless you have anything else to add.
On slavery? Oh man, this got wild very quickly. No, I think we covered most of it. It's been awesome. I'm in such a weird place being a candidate, because my personal views on things and like what I think you can actually do as a government are very different. Like I'm very much in the like, hey, maybe let's like all go live in the woods with our friends on little communes, right? Like, what does that sound like to you? That sounds perfect to me. But you can't just break up a country and put it into small groups. Like, that's not logical. That's something I could do on my own that I think would be a great life for me, but I don't think that would work for other people. So a lot of my politics, it's like I have two brains going at all times. I'm like, what's the answer on something I could really do about this? And like, what's the burn it all to the ground and start over feeling that I'm having right now? But this is always fun to get me like, especially when, a lot of the things that you bring up, a lot of the like interview type things I have, it's more just like questions. It's not as much of a conversation. So it's always nice to have somebody that you like have some of the same ideas with to kind of push back on, to keep it flowing. So I appreciate this.
Yeah. Now, when I get it on, well, actually, before I do that, one more time, talk about your district and the boundaries, like the cities or landmarks in your district.
So from my understanding, unless I just have downloaded the complete wrong map, it is, I'm looking at it because it's behind me. I've got it drawn out. Highway 96 as a southern border up to around Dunbar Road, the north border, goes to Highway 41 on the west, and then about Moody Road on the east. So that's a majority of Warner Robins, bit of Centerville and Byron. I've heard there may be a little bit of Perry in there too, but I haven't found it yet. So we'll see that. But it's mostly Warner Robins, the big chunk in the middle. But it's so small. Yeah. It's such a little baby district now.
Yeah, and it, honestly, I think the Republicans do this somewhat on purpose, because that they control this power and draw on these districts, and literally it's hard to find these districts, and some people may see that and say, wait, you're trying to run in this district, and you're like, literally, this is the best I can come up with, because it is hard as hell to find these district boundaries right now. So yes, I wish you the best of luck. And then the other part of this, if Spotify still lets me, when we publish it out there, they let me put a song in it. And so all of your campaign, everything, the first song that came to mind was Wanted Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi.
I'll take it. Anything cowboy
Okay.
or western or yeah, no, I'm good. I put the good and bad and the ugly, woo woo, and some of my stuff on social media. But yeah, no,
So,
yeah, I've been branding myself for a while like this specifically, so if I campaign, people could recognize me. It just seems like the best way to get like I love people stopping me in public and talking, so I tried to make myself stand out a little bit, and this has been the best way I've found yet.
yeah, you have to have something. I mean, we could talk about other people in politics. So yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thanks very much, Ariel. Anything else before we wrap up or get it published you can think of?
No, I think I've beaten just about every horse. I think I'm good.
All right. All right. We'll chat soon. I'll get you some updates here shortly.
Awesome, appreciate it. Have a good one.
Bye.